I'm David Boles. This is Boles.tv, BOLES.tv, .television. Love that video. So interesting, informative. How science and technology work together to save us from ourselves in many ways. And yet there are people who deny science, deny technology, deny doctors, deny help, deny vaccines. They don't want the help. They don't want to be involved. And then what do you do? It's an interesting, terrible question that leads us into our next topic. We've discussed previously on this Boles TV live stream on the issue of abortion that the Jews will save us because their thousands of years history as a religious conceit is that a baby is not a baby, a child is not a child, a fetus is not a fetus, unless and until it successfully removes itself from its mother. And therefore, under Jewish Talmudic law, a woman is completely in charge of her body. A woman completely decides what happens to her pregnancy in consultation with her doctor, her family, her rabbi, whatever. So when the government tries to step in and say, you cannot have an abortion, these Jewish women eventually are going to go to court and sue and say, on religious grounds, as part of my religious belief, you cannot prevent me from having an abortion. A Roe v. Wade may have been the law of the land for 50 years, but a woman's right to choose in Jewish law is much, much older than that. And they'll win. If you protect the rights of Christians, you have to protect the rights of the Jew, even though people won't want to, but how do you get around it? And yes, there will be conversions to Judaism. And what are you going to do about it? Oh, you're just saying that so you can get an abortion. Well, I wouldn't have to if I could get one, is the response. But even in that milieu of understanding, of wealth of information, there are interesting, subtle things that also happen to a people and to a life. And there is a really fascinating article this morning, I'm clicking into my account, from the New York Times about Hasidic Jews and their education. And I will put this link in our Discord channel in the live links. And this is the argument in the title of this long, fascinating topic. In Hasidic enclaves, failing private schools are flush with public money. Now, it might surprise some of us that, your taxes, government money goes to pay for private religious schooling. New York's Hasidic Jewish religious schools have benefited from $1 billion in government funding in the last 4 years, but are unaccountable to outside oversight. The Hasidic Jewish community has long operated one of New York's largest private schools on its own terms, resisting any outside scrutiny of how its students are faring. But in 2019, the Central United Talmudical Academy agreed to give state standardized tests in reading and math to more than 1,000 students. Every one of those students failed. Now, how does that happen? Well, this article goes on to argue that these schools begin early, 7:30 in the morning, and for 8-9 hours, these students study religious texts for 8 hours. And if they misbehave, they can be corporally punished, slapped, hit, kicked. And then maybe in the afternoon, around 3, 4 in the afternoon, they might do an hour of history or social studies or math or even English. Often English teachers cannot speak the language fluently themselves in these schools. Many earn as little as $15 an hour. Some have been hired off Craigslist or ads on lamp posts. During religious study, teachers in many of the boys' schools have regularly smacked, slapped, and kicked their students. Records and interviews show, creating an environment of fear that makes learning difficult. At some schools, boys have called 911 to report being beaten up. And that is the conundrum, because these schools want to teach religion over any other sort of education. And you have people from that community teaching that community. So if you have teachers who may be illiterate, can't write, read English, don't know history, don't know social studies, but they know their religion, you create a vicious sort of circle where no growth or knowledge can expand, where there's no way to assimilate knowledge from an outside mind to an internal mind. If everybody's learning the same thing and regurgitating the same thing, generation to generation to generation, where is the growth? Where is the need to learn beyond the simple umbilical? Or is the only thing that matters being devout and religious, finding your way home through only things that your religion wants you to know? Nothing else matters. And this article goes on to show examples of writing from these students, interviews with students who have graduated and failed. And it is alarming and concerning. And it makes you wonder just exactly what is the point of it? Just to create devout followers who will do as they are instructed? Live in a closed community? No influence or interest in the outside world? As there was one student who didn't know how to live a life, sort of escaped, called a suicide hotline just because he didn't know what to do or where to call. Couldn't really speak English, couldn't really read English, and the suicide prevention person was able to exchange images. They would draw images of what to do next and where to go next and what it would be like to find refuge. He was looking for a place to sleep because he had no place to go. So, is this how vicious circles are created? Echo chambers, silos, where the only thing that matters is faith and belief in the system. There is no education, there is no understanding. A lot of these Hasidic communities are against vaccines. They think the vaccine goes against God. And so, you think, well, okay, they stay in their community. They don't interact with other people. It's their religious freedom at stake, their choice, right? Well, what happens if they happen to be in a community that is not traditionally theirs? Interacting with non-Hasidic Jews, and they are unvaccinated. Then what happens? Do they infect people? Do they get infected and bring it home to their community? And then what do? And then what happens to the infection and the spread of disinformation? So religion can cut very many ways. You want to say it cuts both ways, but it's more than both. The Jews will save abortion, but there are also some Jews who do not want to be saved by education other than what is written in an established religious text. And in that context, we move to the next step of religion in our community with this very strange story of a Kansas teacher who is going to receive $95,000 after she was suspended for refusing to use a student's preferred name and pronouns. Now, in a way, that's called deadnaming. If a person transitions from one sex to another, one of our regular friends here, Beyonce 2, began life as a male and is currently transitioning to a female. Beyonce 2 prefers to be called she, and no surgery, just started medication, considers herself female. So there are students in this school, in Kansas school, who wanted to be called by a different pronoun. And the teacher refused, and the student complained. And on religious grounds, the teacher won a settlement of $95,000 for deadnaming a student. A Kansas teacher will receive $95,000 from her ex-employer after the school suspended her for refusing to use a student's preferred name and pronouns. Mala Ricard, formerly of Fort Riley Middle School, says doing so would have violated her Christian beliefs. Ricard sought a religious accommodation to avoid using the student's preferred pronouns. Now, why is a person like that teaching in the first place? I don't believe this was a religious school. I believe this was a public school. And you bring your religion into the classroom? We live in interesting times. According to the complaint, Ricard was suspended for 3 days and given a formal written reprimand after referring to a student by his legal name, deadnaming. However, the student, whose biological sex is female, had a different preferred name and uses he and him pronouns. Research has shown misgendering or deadnaming transgender or non-binary people can have harmful effects on mental health. I will put the link to that study on our Discord server as well. Upon returning from her 3-day suspension, Ricard appealed the disciplinary action with the school board and superintendent. She asked for and was denied a religious accommodation that would have allowed her to avoid using the student's preferred name and pronouns. Ms. Ricard is a Christian and holds sincere religious beliefs consistent with the traditional Christian and biblical understanding of the human person and biological sex, the complaint reads. Continuing, Ms. Ricard believes that God created human beings as either male or female, that this sex is fixed in each person from the moment of conception and that it cannot be changed. Well, now some people will say, look, there are not two sexes. There's male and then there's Adam's rib. Her lawyers argued that referring to the student by his preferred name and pronouns violated Miss Ricard's conscience and her First Amendment rights to free speech and free exercise of religion. Well, I hope the student turns around and sues the teacher, because you are violating that student's right to be called whatever they want to be called. As part of the settlement, school officials agreed to issue a statement saying Ricard was in good standing when she retired, without any disciplinary actions against her, which is sort of the coward's way out. So, you dead name a student? You say God told you to do it? And you collect a bounty of $95,000. This is the story I'll share with you on our Discord channel. This is the study, a minority stress perspective on transgender individuals' experiences with misgendering. It explains why the teacher is absolutely wrong and should not be teaching children. Speaking of dead naming, hey, have you heard about monkeypox? It's not funny, but this is sort of funny. MPX, Mpox, the struggle to replace monkeypox with a name that isn't racist. Now, we may have gone too far. Some people argue that the name monkeypox is racist and disparages an entire continent. Others view it as offensive to gay men. And there are those who fear it could lead to indiscriminate killing of monkeys, as has happened in Brazil. All of that from the word monkeypox. So these administrators are trying to say, should we call it MPX? Should we call it Mpox? I think history tells you is a little bit too late. Dead naming monkeypox, I'm not sure is going to work. Or undead naming monkeypox is not going to work. Because it's been around for a long time and people have just kind of called it that. So there isn't one solution that's going to make everybody happy. Monkeypox was first recorded in people in 1970 in a 9-month-old boy in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In past outbreaks, animals, especially rodents, have been the primary source of transmission to human beings. It's a cousin of smallpox. Terms like swine flu and Middle Eastern respiratory system, China flu, Wuhan flu, have had unintended negative impacts by stigmatizing a certain community or economic sectors. Ask people what they dislike about the name monkeypox, and you'll likely get a different answer from each of them. Some think it reflects a history of nomenclature related to disease that assigns blame. In the early days of AIDS, when the disease was mislabeled as gay-related immune deficiency or GRID, using the word monkey to refer to a virus is not only directly links it to an animal associated with the African continent, but also associates potentially the behavior of gay men as being monkey-like. In the hands of the wrong people, they can stigmatize those who might be affected by the disease. So they're thinking of MPX. Not very good. MPX is also the name of a machine gun. Mpox, not great because the monkey attribution doesn't really go away. So that conversation continues. It's going to be an interesting thing to see what happens. And speaking of dead naming, way back in November of last year, there was an order that SQA, S-Q-U-A, in the federal government, is a derogatory term that should be retired. So, this is what Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland wanted to establish. She has declared that squaw is a derogatory term, an Indian term, and ordered the Board of Geographic Names, the federal body tasked with naming geographic places, to implement procedures to remove the term from federal usage. Now, there are some people who are not going to do it. They're going to call Squaw Valley, Squaw Valley. They're going to dead name the squaw. The secretary continues, racist terms have no place in our vernacular or on our federal lands. Our nation's lands and waters should be places to celebrate the outdoors and our shared cultural heritage. Okay, it's all right. It makes sense. The term squaw is derogatory and creates a federal task force to find replacement names for geographic features on federal lands bearing the term squaw. The term has historically been used as an offensive, ethnic, racial, and sexual slur, particularly for indigenous women. There are currently more than 650 federal lands that create the term, according to a database. So all that is good. All that is right. We agree with it. Now here's where government ridiculousness comes into play. So the title of this press release from the Department of the Interior is Secretary Haaland takes action to remove derogatory names from federal lands. Okay. Here it is from a week ago. Interior Department completes removal of SQ underline from federal use. Now, if you're trying to get your point across, sometimes you might have to use dead naming so you can be clear in the context of what you want people to understand. When I received this PR release from the Department of the Interior, and I'm trying to figure out removal of SQ __, what? Didn't make any sense. Didn't understand it. Will people understand it? So you say you're going to get rid of it. You get rid of it, technically, in the database. And then when you announce it, you can't announce the good thing you did because you have banned yourself from using that term. That seems like a catch-22. A very bizarre thing to say. It's okay to say the word squaw, and you're not going to use it anymore. Oh, I just used it. I guess that's what they're worried about. The Department of the Interior today announced the Board on Geographic Names, the BGN, has voted on the final replacement of the names for 650 geographic features featuring the word SQ __. But right there, it's just ridiculous. It reads like parody, a satire on itself. The final vote completes the latest step in the historic efforts to remove the term from federal land usage. All great, terrific, makes sense. The way it was done leaves a lot to be desired. It gives the people who hate the word woke a lot of ammunition to fire back on this topic. Hey, did you hear we removed this word that we're not going to say? I guess it's like saying the N-word. But instead of saying S word, which most people would think is not squaw, you say SQ __. This is our modern world. Sometimes we spin in it, and sometimes the modern world spins us back. Here's the database, the official database of the names that were changed. The removed SQ name. Now, is that the most ridiculous thing in this table that we're looking at? And I will share this with you in our Discord server. Removed SQ name. But then you say squaw in the entire rest of the column. Squaw Canyon is now Santa Teresa Canyon. Squaw Canyon, these are in different places. North Timp Canyon. So we have a lot of Squaw Canyons. Another Squaw Canyon is Red Rock Canyon now. Okay, it's all great, but it looks ridiculous. It makes you look a little bit silly. It's okay to use the past term in order to make the new term right. From this point on, we're never saying squaw again. We're not having any more releases about it. And here's the geographic map of all these 650 places that have the SQ__ name in it. And I will share this with you as well in our Discord server. Well, we've had a wonderful show. Had wonderful visits from our friend Donna and our friend Linda. Talked about many interesting, wild things. We live in a complicated and confusing world. And the reason we try to uncomplicate things is because we try to make sense of the human condition. Right here on Boles.tv.